From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, we had big news coming out of Rome this week. As people who tune into this show know, I've been watching like a hawk the canonization reschedule for Carlo Acutis, that young boy who is on the path to sainthood as a blessed and will be declared a saint. I stayed up late on the night of June 13th in order to find out that announcement of his rescheduled, because there was a consistory, a general consistory with the cardinals in which they were going to schedule the date of his canonization. And I hoped, fingers crossed, that he'd be bundled together with Pier Giorgio Frassati. Of course, people who tune into this show know that I'm headed there on August 28th, or July 28th through August 4th, for a pilgrimage to Rome. And I was hoping, of course, planning to see the canonization of Pier Giorgio Frassati, the other famous young male Italian saint. Well, that didn't quite happen as I had prognosticated. I figured they'd have both of them being canonized on the same day, but instead they changed the date of the canonization that had been announced, and now that's happening on September 7th. Both Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati will be canonized together, and that'll be the first canonization for Pope Leo. And of course, that'll be a big one to celebrate, and we'll see. Maybe I'll be there for that one as well. Later in the show, we'll be talking with two authors on this program today. Charles Coulombe is the author of Zita, Empress of Austria, Queen of Hungary. We all know Blessed Charles of Austria, one of the most famous kings or rulers to become recognized as a blessed or saint. But this book is about his wife, and it's fascinating, the behind-the-scenes details. Perhaps we'll have two saints coming from the same couple. And we'll be joined by one of our favorite guests. It's Anthony DeStefano. He has got a new book, The Miracle Book. It's a simple guide to asking for the impossible. And that book is out just now, available on Amazon and anywhere Catholic books are sold. We'll be excited to talk to Anthony later in the program. And check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. Each week I travel somewhere around the world, and this Saturday, June 21st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I travel to Knock, the Marian apparition site of Ireland. And I'm there for the place where Mary appeared to a large crowd of people in the pouring rain. And that was on April 21st, 1879, in a singular and silent vision of the Virgin Mary. So check that one out, Explore Knock, and that's Saturday, June 21st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. In my other series on EWTN, They Might Be Saints, on June 25th at 10:30 p.m., we've got Bishop Alphonse Gallegos. He strolled the streets of Sacramento, saving souls by visiting families and mixing with lowriders in his Latino community. I'll be profiling the Bishop of the Barrios, that is Alphonse Gallegos. Check that one out on the next They Might Be Saints. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today's day, we've got Blessed Jacques Morel Dupas from France. And in the 365 Days with Mary project, we've got the icon of the Mother of God of Yaroslav in Russia in the year 1501. And the question of the week, what is the best way to talk to Protestants about miracles? I'll do my best to answer that one later in the show. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And for people who want to find out the latest and greatest miracle news, they can connect to my Facebook page where I post all the miracles happening all around the world and those that are in the news and otherwise. And you may have heard of this one. This one was got a lot of attention. There was an Air India crash, and I believe there were 200 passengers, and only one survived. And people are calling this person who escaped death, they're calling this event a miracle. And, of course, there were hundreds of victims that were claimed, but out of this fireball, this Vivash Kamur Ramesh survived. And you're probably aware of this, that this happened recently. The world leaders have sent their usual support and condolences to the families of these victims. Pope Leo offered up a prayer for all those who perished, but the survival of that one passenger on that doomed flight is leading many to think of this as a miracle. And it was a routine flight home from India to England. Air India Flight 171 became the scene of one of the country's worst air disasters. It's an unlikely story of survival. It was a Boeing 787, and it crashed into a residential area moments after takeoff, and it claims hundreds of lives, including almost all, except for one, of the 242 passengers and crew who were on board. Against all odds, one man walked out alive, and that was Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, age 40, who was in seat 11A, and he climbed out amidst the smoldering wreckage, and he was the sole survivor of the June 12th crash that devastated so many. And in a quote, talking to the Economic Times, he said, "I don't know how I'm alive," and he told his video in a stunned call after escape the wreckage. And this was 30 seconds after takeoff. There was a loud noise, and when the plane crashed, it all happened so quickly, Ramesh recalled from his hospital bed, as shared by The Guardian. And when my eyes were opened, I was alive. And so truly amazing. Of course, this is a great sadness, the death of the 241 other passengers. We must pray for them. But truly an amazing circumstance that one person walked away in what people are calling a miracle. And for the people who want to read more about this story, I've posted a link on the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week, where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. People who know me know I love trivia, and you might find me at a bar playing pub trivia on some random night. But this is Catholic Pub Trivia. And so the question from last week was, and we talked about Father Emil Capon and a new film that's about on the last episode of The Miracle Hunter, so check that one out if you missed it. But he was the most recently declared venerable from the United States, and the question is, have there been any other venerable blesseds or saints who lived in Kansas? And the answer is St. Rose Philippine Duquesne, who was canonized on July 3rd, 1988 by Pope John Paul II. And her connection to Kansas was she served the Powhatan at the Sugar Creek Mission near Mound City, eastern Kansas. And she was revered there as the woman who prays always. And so that was St. Rose Philippine Duquesne as the other resident of Kansas on the path to sainthood. And, of course, she's completed that path. She's a saint. Question for this week, we were talking, of course, about the big news, Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis, now to be canonized on September 7th. That was just announced by Rome. And so the question for this week is, who was the last Italian man to be canonized? Question for this week, who was the last Italian man to be canonized? If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be winning that prize, and answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Charles Coulombe, the author of Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love talking about saints on this show, as people who tune into the show know. And I think that it's amazing that saints can come from all walks of life, the young and the old, those simple people like the Fatima children, who history would not know their names, and other people who are famous and have had influence on the world. We might point specifically to the case of Blessed Charles of Austria and his wife, Empress Zita. They were a devout Catholic couple and lived a life of faith, love, and service, often amidst political turmoil and exile. And they're remembered for a strong marriage, a great devotion to God, and they worked to bring peace during World War I. And Charles was beatified in 2004, and Zita's cause for beatification is currently under consideration. And I think it's always noteworthy when you have a blessed or a saint who's married. And of course, there are many priests and nuns, or maybe mostly priests and nuns, who are recognized as saints, but there are others who are married. So we always wonder about the spouse of that blessed or saint, what they did to help get that person recognized, or to get them to heaven, most importantly. And so we're so excited today to be joined by the author of a brand new book from Tan Books. The name of the book is Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary. And that's Charles Coulombe. Welcome to the program today, Charles.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to talk about this amazing story. Tell me, what do you find most compelling about Zita, especially? A lot of people focus, of course, on her husband, but what is it about Empress Zita that's so fascinating?
Well, I think it's her perseverance, frankly, because, Charles, in a way, Blessed Carl, was almost like a comet zipping across the sky, lights up everything, and then he's gone. But she was in for the long haul. She stayed loyal to his cause and to the faith, to what they were trying to do together. And she kept their joint vision alive from the time he died in 1922 the time she died in 1989. And she did this through war, through exile, through an astonishing number of adventures. And bear in mind, she starts out when he dies. She's got 7 children. She's pregnant with an 8th. She's in exile. She has no money. And the Allies have no intention of letting her go unless she agrees to abdicate for herself and her children. But through a very odd set of circumstances, you're the miracle hunter, so you wouldn't be too surprised. But she, on Carl's deathbed, he said to her, "I've talked to the King of Spain. He'll take care of you as soon as I'm gone and buried. Get a hold of him, and he'll look after you." And she said, "Well, you couldn't have spoken to the King of Spain. That's not bothering. Don't worry about it. Just do as I say." So he dies. He's buried. She does contact the King of Spain, and he sends a warship to pick them up. And the British say, "Well, we're not going to let them leave." And he says, "Well, if you fire on the ship, you're at war with Spain." They back down, and the family board the ship. They go to Spain. They take the train to Madrid, and then the Empress is in with King Alfonso and asks him, basically, "Why did you risk war with Britain to do this? We're very grateful, obviously, but why'd you do it?" And he said, "Well, it's a very strange thing, but the day they told me her husband was dying, I suddenly got this strange, overpowered feeling that if I didn't look after you and the children, the same thing would happen to my wife and family one day." And she told him in turn what Carl had said, and they sort of rolled their eyes at each other. But anyway, that was the beginning of her solo story, and it was quite something against the backdrop of World War II. Eventually, the Depression burst, and World War II, rise of communism, and through it all, she stayed the course.
Amazing. And how important was she behind the scenes or alongside of her husband in his career?
Very. He was definitely the one who decided policy, as you might say. But she used all her influence and all her considerable charm and ability to back him up. And of course, she had a whole set of talents. For instance, she was fluent in Romanian, and when they were touring Pennsylvania, she went to go see the wounded, not the Austrian-speaking Romanian troops, because they were all deployed against the Russians and the Italians, but the Romanian POWs who had been captured on the front. And they were astonished that she spoke to them in Romanian, and they came away just absolutely in love with her. And that was not uncommon. She always impressed the people that she met, and that too is an interesting thing about her. She could be absolutely tough as nails, but she was very feminine, very charming, very. She could be an Iron Maiden without losing the charm, if you see what I mean.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Charles Coulombe about his new book, Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary. And some people have speculated or pointed out that she played a role in the fall of communism. Talk about anything she did there.
Well, certainly. And this, after I came to school here at the ITI in Coulombe, I was able to speak to a lot of people who had known her, had been around at the time, and seen the fall. And she died in '89, which was the beginning of the fall. But for her funeral, they had an imperial funeral, the first one since Franz Josef in 1916. And reenactment military units were recruited from behind the Iron Curtain. Now, this was illegal. This is strictly illegal what they did. But they came in large numbers in the uniforms of the old units of the empire from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, what was Yugoslavia, etc. And then they went home with this incredible memory. And a lot of people are of the opinion that her intercession was perhaps the missing link, in addition to the work of John Paul II and President Reagan and so on, that finally pushed it over the edge, as you might say, because it made it also immediate what they had as opposed to what they did have at that time. It's a long time ago now, 1989, but at the time, I can still remember what an amazing thing it was. And even to have the Austrian government permit an imperial funeral was in itself amazing.
And for those people who look at these stories, these historical stories, and say these are people of the past or another world perhaps, what can we take away from this story and say about the relevance for today's world?
Well, a couple of things. One is, if we're looking in terms of leadership, we have very low standards today. We don't expect much, and we don't get much. Where we look at people like Carl and Zita, and it's true, they're like medieval characters who come to life. But there's no reason why we shouldn't pray and hope and work for the same quality of people in leadership. So that's one thing. I mean, they were willing to die for their people. Why shouldn't we be willing to expect the same thing out of our own leaders? That's all on one side, though. They were extraordinary as a husband and wife team. They were extraordinary as parents. And in the case of Carl, he was an extraordinary son. This was something I wrote his biography before I wrote Zita's. And his parents were very ill-matched for each other. But he got the very best out of both of them and not the worst elements on the one hand. And on the other hand, he stayed on good terms with both of them. So just as they're good patrons for today's parents and today's husbands and wives, they're good patrons also, Charles in particular, for people from difficult backgrounds, difficult home life.
So, Charles, what can we take away from the story of Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary, and that of her husband?
What we can take away, I think, above all, is perseverance in the faith. in season and out of season. And as I said, we've got to put it at the center of our lives. It's not something to be put off to the side or to be done only on Sundays or at home. It's something that has to illumine every element of our lives, everything we do. I think that's her basic lesson to us.
Wonderful. And for those people who want to pick up this book, Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary, out from Tan Books, what is the best place that people can go?
Well, Tan Books themselves, of course. Amazon have it. And as they say, wherever fine Catholic books are sold.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Charles Coulombe, author of Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary. Fascinating book. Thank you so much for joining us on today's program.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
God bless. That was Charles Coulombe. That was a fascinating discussion. People may have known about Blessed Charles, but his wife, Zita, there's a whole book now dedicated to her. And, of course, she's on the path to sainthood. She's a servant of God, and she may follow along her husband to become a blessed and maybe someday a saint. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. How can Catholics talk to Protestants about miracles? Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world, as though those that have happened centuries ago. And I love getting the email questions. I've got the strangest inbox in America. Got some pretty interesting things bouncing around in there. But I also love getting questions in person. And this week's question is from a talk I gave this past week. I spoke in Missouri. I spoke to the KMMK fundraiser there. Thanks for having me out to speak to your great listeners and supporters. That was a fun night. And one of the great questions that I got in the crowd was, how do you talk to a Protestant about miracles? And of course, it's complicated, isn't it? I think that when we talk about the difference in belief between Catholics and Protestants, we're talking about Protestants, of course, are very excited about healing miracles, as are Catholics. And so anytime you have healing miracles recognized by the Catholic Church, that is something of interest. I think to see God working in the lives of people, I think Protestants and Catholics and otherwise can get excited about that. But it gets a little complicated because we talk about the intercession of saints when Catholics are talking about healing miracles. And of course, that isn't always something that's welcomed with open arms for the Protestant believers out there. So that gets complicated. And then, of course, if you talk about things like Eucharistic miracles or apparitions of Mary or weeping statues of Mary, or incorruptible saints or otherwise, it all gets complicated because once you start believing in those things, well, you pretty much have to be Catholic. I think that's just how it goes. But so, I think that we can all recognize, Protestants, Catholics, and otherwise, that we pray to God for these big things happening in our lives and for His help. But when we talk about saints and Mary and Eucharistic miracles and otherwise, then of course we get into the conversation of when are you going to join the team, kind of thing, if a Protestant starts believing that. So, but anyway, I would say that, of course, healing miracles are a great place to start. And of course, we're praying to Jesus for all these things in the end anyway. So I think that, of course, is the great point of connection between all Christian believers. So thanks so much for your question at the talk. And for those people who would be interested in having me speak at your event or your parish or your conference, you can just send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com or just go to my website, click on the contact tab, and you can send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking somewhere in your area sometime soon. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. For today, we've got the icon of the Mother of God of Yaroslav. in Russia in the year 1501. And of course, in previous programs, we talk about Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, any of these famous ones. We all know those feast days, but believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion that lines up to each and every day of the calendar year. So again, this one from Russia in 1501 is the icon of the Mother of God of Yaroslav. And so the story goes that Princes Vasily and Constantine of Yaroslav made a great effort to reconstruct and restore many Orthodox churches in the 13th century after the Tatar invasions under Khan Baum. Grand Duke Ivan the Great of Moscow ordered in 1501 a stone church be built in honor of the two saints, featuring the icon they were devoted to displayed above their incorrupt bodies. One of these icons was a depiction of the Virgin Mary, and the image became known as the Yaroslav Mother of God. Her feast day is celebrated on June 21st, or June 8th, in the Julian calendar. And that's for today's date, the 365 Days with Mary project, the icon of the Mother of God of Yaroslav from Russia. For more information about this fascinating devotion or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to 365dayswithmary.com, pick up the book, connect with the Facebook page, which has 10,000 followers, or you can download the free app from the iOS App Store called 365 Days with Mary, Marian Calendar. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week where we talk about those people, servants of God, venerables, blesseds, and saints in their process being recognized by Rome in each of those various stages. And of course, on previous shows, we've been talking a lot about this very interesting projection of the canonization of Carlo Acutis. He's my patron saint, you might say, of miraclehunter.com anyway, and his interest in Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions and other miracles, it mirrors mine and inspires mine. So I was especially excited to attend the canonization of Carlo Acutis, and I went to Italy for that in April, and of course Pope Francis passed away, so didn't get to go to that, but I've been trying to watch to find out when his canonization would be rescheduled, because we knew that would happen. And my theory, anyway, was that this was going to be bundled with the Pier Giorgio Frassati canonization at the beginning of August. And I had plans to be there in August for the Pier Giorgio canonization, so I thought, wouldn't it be great, and wouldn't it be logical and sensible for them to bundle the two canonizations together, and wouldn't that be a nice bonus for me to see my patron saint in canonization of one that I was going to be at anyway. Well, anyway, things didn't work out exactly how I had prognosticated or thought was sensible. Turns out that, yes, Pier Giorgio Frassati will be canonized with Carlo Acutis. That was what the headline said, and when I first saw the headlines, I was overjoyed, but then I read on to find out that the two young saints will be canonized together. They were just announced this past week at the consistory that Blessed Carlo Acutis and Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati will be canonized together on Sunday, September 7th. So, not August 3rd, but the next month. I have no idea why they did that. That messes up a lot of plans for a lot of people who are planning on being in Rome, pilgrims and otherwise, for that canonization. So, very complicated. Not sure why they did it, but that is exactly what happened. And so there's another group of 7 saints scheduled for October 19th, and that group is Bartolo Longo, the Italian layman and promoter of the Rosary in Pompeii, Peter Torot, who is the lay catechist and martyr from Papua New Guinea, and Jose Gregorio Hernandez Cisneros, the Venezuelan doctor known for his service to the poor, and Ignatius Maloyan, an Armenian bishop and martyr, and Maria del Monte Carmelo, a Venezuelan religious, Vincenza Maria Poloni, and Maria Troncati, Italian religious sisters dedicated to the sick and the poor. And so we've got lots of canonizations coming right up in September and October, but none in August, as I was hoping for. So anyway, that is the news from this week, that public consistory for the voting on the causes of canonization on the 13th. We got the date right. We got the content right as far as who was going to be discussed and who was going to be assigned, but we got the date completely wrong, and now it's in September. So interesting news coming out of Rome this past week. Let's take a look at the Might Be Saint of the Day. We do this every week where we talk about those people on the path to sainthood, servants of God, venerables, blesseds before they have all their miracles and are declared saints by Rome. And we always try to find somebody whose death, anniversary, or feast day, in the case of blesseds, lines up exactly to the day's date. So for today's date, June 21st, we've got the memorial of Blessed Jacques Morel Dupas. He was the martyrs of the hulks of Rochefort. And he was a priest of the Diocese of Poitiers in France, and he was imprisoned on a ship in the harbor of Rochefort. And he was left to die during the anti-Catholic persecutions of the French Revolution. And he was one of the martyrs of the hulks of Rochefort. And he was born on November 10th, 1754, in Charente in France, and he died on June 21st, 1794, aboard the prison ship Du Auchier in Rochefort. And he's declared venerable by Pope John Paul II in a decree of martyrdom on July 2nd, 1994, and blessed by John Paul II on October 1st, 1995. And with one miracle, Blessed Jacques Morel Dupas will be known as Saint Jacques, and he is today's Might Be Saint of the Day. For those people interested in checking out my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available at EWTNRC.com, the EWTN Religious Catalog, that's a book about 24 of the blesseds and venerables from the United States. You can also check out my series, They Might Be Saints, which airs on EWTN, and coming right up on June 25th at 10:30 p.m. Central Time is the episode of They Might Be Saints on Bishop Alphonse Gallegos, which is the story of the Bishop of the Barrio, who from Sacramento, and he walked the streets in California and talked with the lowriders and those people who needed his help, and he was known as the Bishop of the Barrio. Check that one out, one of my favorite episodes. That's Wednesday, June 25th at 10:30 p.m. Central Time on EWTN Television. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Anthony DeStefano about his book, The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, I love getting your questions. People write in with questions around the world, and I get this question a lot. Different people are kind of frustrated with this idea. We all celebrate the big miracles, and we talk about Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, even the healing miracles and the miracles big and small that happen in our own lives. Well, what happens when miracles don't happen, or when we don't really know how to pray for miracles, or we're kind of frustrated with where things are at? Well, there's a brand new book that's out. I think it's really hitting an important spot in the sense that many people have this need, have this question of how to pray for a miracle. And the name of the book is called The Miracle Book, A Simple Guide to Asking for the Impossible. And that's written by best-selling author Anthony DeStefano. Welcome to the program, Anthony. It's great to have you back.
Well, it's great to be back, Michael, and I want to thank you on the air because you're one of the inspirations. Your show is one of the inspirations for this book. I've been listening to your show for quite a while, and I said, we need a book just on this topic, and that was one of the reasons was because I was listening to your show. So thank you. I wanted to publicly acknowledge that.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I've always been a fan of your work as well, and I'm so happy that you turned your attention directly to miracles and this very important and complicated question in some ways, but you're going to clarify for that. So what actually is the Miracle Book, and what inspired you to write this?
Sure. Well, I guess you'd call it a practical, nuts and bolts type of guide to praying for a miracle. And the miracle might be anything. It might have to do with your health or your finances or family problems you're having, or maybe just feelings of anxiety or hopelessness. But, regardless of your level of religious faith, even if you have no faith at all, as a matter of fact, I think there comes a time in life when all of us experience the need for supernatural help. We know we just can't do it ourselves. And I think that there are a lot of people out there, including people listening to your show, who are suffering badly, but they don't know how to go about asking God for help other than begging him. You know, they beg, they plead, they negotiate with God. They promise they'll do absolutely anything if only God will grant them this one request. And then if God doesn't answer their prayer in the way they want, as you were just speaking about, or sometimes they lose their faith, or they get angry at God, or they sink into a kind of a despair. You know, there must be a better way. There must be a method of praying for a miracle that guarantees the best possible chance of God saying yes to us, or at least results in God answering us in a way that gives us some peace or satisfies our souls. I did many years of research on this subject, even before I decided to write a book on it. Long time ago, I read C.S. Lewis's book on miracles, and I think I read every single book out there. And I think, in all humility, that I did succeed in finding that better way. And I don't use any gimmicks in this book, as you know. I don't provide any magic formulas. The book has an imprimatur from the Archdiocese of New York. It was endorsed by Cardinal Dolan and several other bishops. I don't guarantee specific results, but I do offer solid, biblically based, theologically sound principles that I believe can dramatically increase a person's chances of obtaining a miracle.
Yeah, it's really a much-needed book, The Miracle Book, A Simple Guide to Asking for the Impossible. Now, you say in the first chapter, and this is really interesting, I've often pondered this riddle myself. We talk about miracles happening every day, or they're as rare as winning the lottery. Can you explain how that's possible, that those two things?
Well, yeah, I mean, we hear it said all the time, miracles happen every day, right? I mean, and yet most of us know from experience that when we pray for a miracle, we don't usually get one. So what statement is true? And I think there's several ways of looking at the question. Some of our Protestant brothers and sisters, they think that all we need to do is to obtain a miracle is to have more faith, to exercise fully the authority and dominion that was given to us by Christ. And other very fervent believers think that you can have all the faith in the world and still be refused a miracle because, it's not in line with God's will. A third view, and the thesis of this book, is that there's really no riddle at all, that obtaining a miracle is both easy and difficult because it involves a kind of a paradox. A paradox is a statement that seems contradictory, but in reality leads us to understanding a deeper truth. And in this case, the truth is this, that if you use the strict definition of a miracle, which is a supernatural intervention by God in the natural order of things, like the parting of the Red Sea or the overnight disappearance of a malignant tumor without any treatment, then yes, those kinds of miracles are very rare. But if we're talking about miracles in a more general way, broadly defined as an extraordinary answer to prayer that goes against the laws of statistics, but unfolds through perfectly natural means, like for instance, someone who doesn't have any money and who's about to lose his house, and they pray for a miracle, and then suddenly they receive the exact amount they need through some kind of inheritance or some other kind of gift. Those kinds of crazy, quote-unquote, coincidences do happen all the time, and they are definitely from God. But strictly speaking, they're not true miracles. So to me, it's not really a riddle or a contradiction to say that miracles are rare but also frequent. It just depends on the definition of miracle you're using, and this book I've written discusses both types.
Very well put. We're talking today with Anthony DeStefano about his new book, The Miracle Book, A Simple Guide to Asking for the Impossible from Sophia Institute Press. And what's another idea is this, it's sort of another paradox when people pray for miracles. This idea, we might say there's an emphasis on sort of self-reliance and also surrendering to God. I think there's a little bit of a contradiction there as well. How do you deal with that? Two sides of the same coin might be.
Well, this is one of the great paradoxes of the spiritual life, I think. On the one hand, you're expected to act. You have to go to the doctor when you're sick. You have to call a lawyer when you're in legal trouble. You have to fight injustice when you see it. You have to use all your talents to solve all your problems. You can't just sit back and do nothing. You have to fulfill your obligations in life. You can't be completely passive and expect God to do all the work because he's not going to do it. But at the same time, after you've done all you can do, you have to be able to let go. You have to relinquish. You have to trust that whatever the outcome you're working and praying for, that's ultimately in God's hands. You have to try to be at peace, even if you're afraid that things might not turn out the way you hope. In other words, you have to say what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane: "Not my will, but your will be done." So with every other paradox of the faith, it's not an either-or situation. It's both. Yes, you have to be self-reliant. Yes, you have to use every gift and resource God has given you. But you can't ever make the mistake of thinking that you're in ultimate control. You always have to subordinate your will to God's will. As St. Augustine said, and he said it best, pray as though everything depended on God, work as though everything depended on you. That's the balance you're trying to achieve in the Christian life, and I think that's the sweet spot, if you can call it, when it comes to obtaining miracles.
One of the very interesting things in your book, you ask or guide people or recommend that people be very specific in their prayers. What's interesting, of course, God knows already what we need. Can't we just say, God help me? Why must we be open to God's will entirely, but we also need to be specific? Why this approach?
Sure. Well, of course, you can say, Lord, help me. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and a lot of people do. But what you have to understand is that there is great value in being specific in our prayers. Precision in prayer shows God that we trust Him with the intimate details of our lives, just as we would a close friend. And if your goal as a Christian is to have a personal relationship with the Lord, and all of us should have that goal, then we have to share those kinds of details, because that's what relationship is all about, sharing. When we make specific requests, we're also acknowledging that God isn't just Lord of the church we belong to. He's the Lord of our families. He's the Lord of our finances, the Lord of our bedrooms, the Lord of our vacations. And when we're precise in our prayer, we're acknowledging the fact that God just doesn't view our lives from a distance, like the old song says, but He's here with us right now, right this very second, and He's deeply involved and cares about the things that we care about. At the same time, though, while we're being precise, we have to simultaneously be radically open to God's will. And the reason is that we don't always know what's truly best for us, even when we're praying with great sincerity. In fact, many times we don't really even want what we think we want. Our desires seem real to us, but they're always wrapped up in all our emotions and our pride and our fears. And so openness to God shows that we trust Him, because He can see the big picture. He can see the future. We can't see the future. He wants what's best for us, not just in the moment, but forever. So I think that when you embrace this miracle paradox of being specific in your prayer life, but at the same time radically open to God's will, all the channels of divine possibility and grace are opened up to you. Because of your willingness to give God the maximum amount of faith and surrender, I think God will always find a way to answer you in a manner that fulfills your deepest desires, whether or not you immediately realize it. And this is, by the way, exactly the way Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's the way He was able to save humanity and open up the gates of heaven, by praying just this way.
Wonderful. And I noticed that in your book, you cover a lot. You summarize it all at the very end, and you even put together one miracle prayer at the end. And I think that the hope and with all of this is that we're on the cusp of an age of miracles. But for those people who really are desperate, they feel that they're at the end of their rope. They have nowhere else to turn. They truly need a miracle. And we've all been in different spots in our lives where there's nothing else that we need but a miracle. But what's the most important thing that these people should do?
Well, if you're listening right now and you desperately need a miracle, first of all, you've got to remember that you're not alone. God sees you. He knows exactly what you're going through. He's known from all eternity that you would need a miracle at this moment in time, and that you would be tuning into this program. He's known that. And keeping that in mind, I would say there are like 6 little things that you can do. They're not little, but they're important. First thing is, whenever you're experiencing anxiety, you've got to take a breath and try to be calm. As the Psalms say, be still and know that I am God. Try to put your emotions to the side for a moment. You don't have to feel faith, think faith. We all know that faith is the most important biblical requirement for a miracle. But instead of trying to get all worked up emotionally, make a decisive act of the will to trust God. Second, likewise, make a definitive decision to be sorry for all the sins that you've ever committed and resolve to become a better, holier person. You know, in the Bible, Jesus used miracles to turn sinners around. Jesus was concerned about the inner person more than the outer person. You know, his miracles were always a sign of the transformation of a person's soul. So if you need a miracle, you got to make an effort to clear the deck spiritually. Ask for God's forgiveness. Be willing to change. That's what God wants anyway, so do it. Next, as we just said, you have to be radically open to God's will. Tell him exactly what you want. Be clear, be precise, but then echo the words of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but yours be done. That's the model for all miracle prayers. That kind of surrender isn't weakness, it's spiritual power. And finally, when you pray for a specific miracle, be sure to pray for God's greater glory too. This is something people always forget, but it's so important. In other words, ask God to use your miracle to deepen the faith of the people around you, to make them realize that God is responsible for the great blessing you're receiving, not you. When you seek God's glory in your prayers, you acknowledge that your request isn't just about fulfilling selfish desires, but it's about spreading faith to everybody. You know, and this reflects not only a humble disposition, but a mature faith, and one that I think is more worthy and deserving of a miracle. Those are the main things. Of course, there's other things that are important too, like getting the saints involved and Our Lady involved. All of that stuff is so important. But I would say those four things are the most important.
Wonderful. Well, we've been so grateful to you, Anthony DeStefano, for joining us on today's program, talking about miracles in your new book, The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible. This is a great new book that's out from Sophia Institute Press. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael, for having me. Appreciate it.
God bless. That was Anthony DeStefano talking to us about this great new book, The Miracle Book. Check this one out, available from Sophia Institute Press or anywhere Catholic books are sold. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio. Check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Charles Coulombe, author of the book Zita, Empress of Austria and Queen of Hungary, and also Anthony DeStefano with his new book, The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, every Saturday at 5 p.m. Central Time. This week, on June 21st, we've got Our Lady of Knock. I traveled to Ireland to explore the most famous apparition of the Virgin Mary, where she appeared in the rain to a group of people in silence on April 21st, 1879. Absolutely amazing to be there in Ireland for that one. I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.